Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. The Trump administration is rolling out a new rule that will make it harder for some immigrants to enter and stay in the United States legally. The new regulation would dramatically expand the definition of public charge, a centuries-old term used to classify immigrants who depend on the government for support. The rule, which is set to go into effect in October, would require caseworkers to consider how much green card applicants benefit from public housing, food stamps, and medical welfare programs. The acting director of United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, Ken Cuccinelli, said the change was a cost-saving measure for the government.
So the benefit to taxpayers is a long-term benefit of seeking to ensure that our immigration system is bringing people to join us as American citizens, as legal permanent residents first, who can stand on their own 2 feet, who will not be reliant on the welfare system.
I want to bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns, Camilo Montoya-Galvez, and Finn Gomez. Caitlin is a CBSN political reporter. Camilo is a politics reporter for CBSNews.com, and Finn is a White House producer for CBS News. Welcome to all of you. Camila, I want to start with you. Who is going to be affected by this new rule and how?
Right, so two types of people, Elaine, would be affected by this sweeping new regulation, right? You have immigrants who are here in the U.S., who are not U.S. citizens and who are not green card holders, but are seeking to become permanent residents, right, to secure their green cards. It also affects people abroad who are looking to move to the U.S. on a temporary visas, right? So this change is a seismic one because it expands, as you mentioned, Elaine, a centuries-old term, the public charge term, which basically means an immigrant being a burden on society, and makes it more difficult for low-income immigrants to secure those green cards and the temporary visas as well.
Thank you.
Well, Camilo, the State Department has been using its own public charge rule when considering visa applications. What has the effect been there, and what does that indicate about the changes that this rule will bring?
Right, so months before the Department of Homeland Security issued this final rule today, the State Department had modified its visa guidelines, right, to make sure that the public charge determination under their guidelines to offer temporary visas to people abroad were more rigorous, right? So they denied thousands just during President Trump's tenure, especially from immigrants in Mexico. And the State Department is actually, along with the Department of Justice, going to issue companion rules to satisfy the new requirements by this new Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, rule that was implemented today.
And Finn, so we heard the soundbite there from the briefing. What exactly is the objective here for the White House?
Well, Elaine, I just spoke to a senior White House official who says bluntly this is a move by the White House to move to more merit-based legal immigration system. Essentially, he said, quote, if you move here, two immigrants who come here, if you move here, don't move here so the government can take care of you. We don't want immigrants coming here to be on the government, to live off the government dime. And so essentially, this is a move by the White House to essentially curb and make it harder for certain forms of legal immigration. It's also a win for hardliners on immigration in the White House, like Stephen Miller and Cuccinelli and some of the others who have been advocating for this for a long time. And make no doubt about it, there's also political implications here. The president has long been campaigning on this in 2016 and again now in 2020 on just these type of issues of making it more difficult, more obstacles for immigration to the United States. And so it is a move that has long been expected, and we'll see what happens next.
So, Finn, just one more for you. I'm curious about whether or not there was any sort of data presented at that briefing about the actual sort of long-term benefit that was talked about very sort of broadly there to the American taxpayer. We heard them say that from the podium, that this would be a long-term benefit for the American taxpayer. Was there any kind of estimate, for instance, of how much this might actually save American taxpayers? What went into calculating that, if so?
Yeah, Elaine, they've been talking about that. We actually spoke to them specifically, but they have not offered specific numbers and details about the amount of money that I would save the taxpayers. But it is something they've been talking about. It's something they've been adamant about, and we're waiting and seeing about what those details exactly are.
So Caitlin, DNC Chair Tom Perez attacked President Trump over this rule, writing, quote, "At a time when our country needs a president who will unite us, all Trump wants to do is attack Latino and immigrant communities. This administration's appetite for cruelty is insatiable, and this new policy is just the latest escalation of Trump's anti-immigrant agenda." So how have Democratic presidential candidates responded?
Well, as Finn mentioned, this is something the president wants to make an election issue in 2020, and Democrats couldn't be further from where the president is on this issue. They are talking about broad immigration reforms, talking about offering pathways to citizenship to those who are here undocumented, giving citizenship to dreamers, those brought here by their parents through no fault of their own. They have also been, really criticizing the president's policy at the border, the separation policy specifically. So while immigration isn't necessarily top of mind for Democratic voters, as we see in the polls and talking to voters on the ground, every time the administration comes out with a new immigration policy, it certainly serves to fuel the Democratic base. And we'll see if this continues on as a driving election issue for Democrats. Remember, in the primaries, we might start to see some of this because states like Texas and California go earlier in the cycle. Those are much more diverse states where this could be an issue.
So, Camilo, as this news comes out, you have some new reporting about what is happening to the asylum seekers being forced to wait in Mexico as their cases make their way through U.S. courts. What did you find?
Right, so I spent a day at the immigration court in El Paso in late July to hear the testimonies of people who have been returned to Mexico after they sought asylum at the border, right? They've been subject to the so-called Remain in Mexico policy that the administration is really betting on to deter migration at the U.S.-Mexico border. During these court hearings, it is evident that there's a sense of desperation, hopelessness amongst these people who come to court without a lawyer because they can't find one in Mexico, and that they plead with the judge and tell him, I'm scared to return to Mexico. Please don't send me back. And the judge always tells them that is not within my purview. I cannot allow you to stay in the U.S. and I cannot remove you from this program. So it really highlights what advocates have been raising concerns about this policy, because it highlights that these immigrants come to court with no lawyers and really have no avenue to proceed with their cases while they're in Mexico.
And Finn, from your perspective there, what is the White House's assessment on how this policy is actually working?
Well, Acting Secretary Cuccinelli did say recently, flat out, that this has been a spectacular success. That the stay-at-home Mexico policy has been a spectacular success. And what the administration points to, and again, I just spoke to a White House official a short time ago about this, is they point to the consecutive months of less apprehensions at the border because of this policy. Now, critics have said that there has been a less amount of apprehensions at the policy, partly because of the heat, partly because of the summer heat right now. But the president and this administration fully believe that this policy is working, and they're very happy about the success, what they call the success of this policy.
I want to turn to another issue. So this is happening just over a week after a gunman killed 22 people in El Paso, and the alleged shooter told authorities he was targeting Mexicans. Caitlin, you were in Iowa over the weekend where 2020 candidates took part in this forum hosted by Everytown for Gun Safety. They talked about what they would do on gun control. Let's listen.
We need to get more guns out of circulation. We need to get the guns that are most lethal out of circulation. We need to have the kind of background checks and red flag laws that will help on this. But it's not one thing.
Why? Why is it such that we can't require, without violating anyone's Second Amendment right, that every single weapon sold can only be, the trigger can only be pulled by the person who has the biometric marker to pull it? Imagine how many lives we'd save.
And as president, I will ensure that the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, can study the effect of gun violence as a public health issue that is creating crisis and trauma in our communities.
You know, I'm taking on Wall Street and the drug companies and the insurance companies and the fossil fuel industry. These are all very powerful, greedy entities. And so is the NRA. You have, for the first time, put the NRA on the defensive.
So then, Caitlin, what did voters in Des Moines actually have to say about this issue?
Right, we were there a week after those horrific shootings, and voters that we talked to said that they were thinking about gun control as they were thinking about these candidates because it was so fresh in their minds. We're also at a time where people are coming back from vacation, getting ready to send their kids back to school. So this was an issue, especially in areas that are more suburban, that we've seen kind of be a moving issue. I think what's really interesting is that this conference, where you just played the sound from, organized by gun safety groups, was organized very quickly in the aftermath of those two shootings. And I think that shows kind of the level of activism on this issue, more so than we've seen before. And you've seen early in this contest, Democrats introduce gun policy. Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, several others focused on universal background checks. Cory Booker wants to reform the licensing program. And they have also talked about perhaps using an executive order. All of the candidates, though, talked about the need for public pressure to continue, because we know, after covering several iterations of this and legislation on Capitol Hill, the thing that is the biggest deterrent to any kind of reform is the passage of time. So these candidates were really trying to keep up the pressure, and they also it also raises the question about whether this will be a motivating election issue. Right now, this is top of mind for a lot of people, but does it stay kind of in the public consciousness? A lot of the candidates I asked about said yes, that this is an issue that they're seeing, especially among young people, keeping up momentum. It's going to be a challenge, though, as we know, to keep this kind of at the forefront.
Absolutely. And Finn, it was interesting. Last week, we heard the president come out in favor of, quote unquote, meaningful background checks for gun purchases. Do we know what that means exactly? And is the president sort of standing by that position?
Great question. Actually, yes, the president is standing behind that position, according to the White House. But it is sort of an open and fluid question what specifically he means by that. If he means like certain red flags within the backgrounds of certain potential buyers, or like more of a thorough background check, as universal checks, as we have, as it's been part of the discourse right now. So that's still an open question to see what he says specifically about that. But the White House does say that he has been talking to the White House has been talking to Congress and congressional leadership about this issue.
Yeah, we'll continue to watch and see if the president's position changes. Caitlin, you spoke to Hawaii Congresswoman and Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard, who says she is taking 2 weeks off campaigning to fulfill her National Guard duties. Let's listen to that clip.
Stepping off of the campaign trail for a couple of weeks and putting on my Army uniform to go on a joint training exercise mission in Indonesia. We'll be doing a training exercise with the Indonesian military, focused on a few different things like counterterrorism, humanitarian aid and disaster response, and joining my brothers and sisters from the Hawaii National Guard in doing so.
And how do you feel about going?
I love our country. I love being able to serve our country in so many ways, including as a soldier. And so while some people are telling me, like, gosh, this is a terrible time to leave the campaign, can't you find a way out of it? You know, that's not what this is about. You know, I'm not really thinking about how this will impact my campaign. I'm looking forward to being able to fulfill my service and my responsibility.
So, Caitlin, we heard her answer there. At the same time, she has not yet qualified for the next set of Democratic debates in September. How critical are these next few weeks going to be for all the candidates?
Oh, they're extremely critical. We think of August as kind of a duller time, but this is a time where all the campaigns are really hitting the ground running, especially those members of Congress who don't have the luxury of having a full week to be on the campaign trail. So you're going to see those senators and members of Congress really really ramping up their schedules, trying to capitalize on any momentum that they see. To be able to make that threshold for the debate in September, it's a higher threshold. You have to have more grassroots donors, donations. You have to have a higher polling percentage. Tulsi Gabbard has not made that list yet. There are 9 who have. And so this does raise questions about what kind of impact this will have. Now, she says that she did not think twice about this, that this is also part of her campaign pitch, which is that she's a veteran. She's been arguing on the merits of foreign policy, even though her foreign policy views are highly controversial within the Democratic Party. She says her campaign will still be running, although she can't really keep in touch with it as it goes on. But these next few weeks, watch for these campaigns to be really ramping up their schedules. And also, if you're on social media or anything in the digital space, look to be bombarded with lots of ads from campaigns seeking your $1 donation, because they need every donor they can get.
Right. September is just around the corner. All right. Caitlin, Camilo, and Finn, thank you all very much.